All right, ready to dive deep. Today, it's democratic revolutions and how they shook the world, especially those big ones, the American and French revolutions. And you guys gave us like a whole treasure chest of sources, textbook bits, some intense lecture notes, and even real deal primary sources.
Always exciting to see those connections between these events, how they weave together, and we have just the stuff to unravel it all.
So first things first, let's set the stage. Revolutions don't just kind of pop out of nowhere, right?
Right.
What was going on in the world that made these revolutions even possible?
Well, picture the Enlightenment as this mental powder keg, right?
Right.
Reason, logic, questioning everything. The old ways of doing things were under fire.
So bunch of thinkers basically saying, hey, maybe kings shouldn't have all the power.
Exactly. And guys like John Locke, his ideas, super important for both revolutions, both in America and France.
Right, John Locke, he was all about those natural rights, right?
Yeah.
Life, liberty, property, that whole thing. But how did that, like, abstract stuff actually lead to people revolting?
Think of it this way. Locke said governments get their power from the people they govern, not from some, divine right from God. That idea was like a bomb going off in those monarchies where kings ruled everything.
Yeah, I can see how a king wouldn't be too thrilled about that idea.
Right. And these ideas, they really took hold with the American colonists who were getting more and more frustrated with how Britain was running things. They felt like their rights were being trampled on, especially with that whole no taxation without representation deal.
Yeah, that was a big one. It's amazing to see how those Enlightenment ideas actually got people fired up enough to take action.
Yeah, it shows you the power of ideas, how they can shape what actually happens in the world. And it wasn't just Locke either. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he had this idea of the general will that also added fuel to the fire, especially over in France.
General will. Sounds kind of vague. What's that all about?
Basically, it's the idea that the government should reflect what all the people want, not just the king or some small group at the top, but the will of everyone. Pretty radical stuff back then.
I bet. So you have these Enlightenment thinkers planting the seeds, and those seeds sprout into full-blown revolutions.
And each revolution, while sharing those roots, had its own distinct character. Let's look at the American Revolution first.
Okay, let's jump in. Everyone knows the no taxation without representation slogan, but what were some of the things that really pushed the colonists to the breaking point?
Well, like you said, taxes were huge. Britain kept slapping new taxes on the colonists without giving them any say in the matter. Totally went against what the colonists saw as their rights, as Englishmen.
It was about the principle of the thing, not just the money itself.
Exactly. And it wasn't just taxes. There were limits on trade, on moving west, all sorts of things that were making the colonists angry. And then you have Thomas Paine. He wrote this pamphlet called Common Sense. It really captured that anger, gave it a voice, and made a strong argument for independence.
Paine was great at taking complicated ideas and making them understandable, right?
Oh, absolutely. Common Sense was like a viral sensation, spreading the idea of revolution like wildfire. He questioned the whole idea of monarchy, said it was outdated, and pushed for republicanism, which, goes back to Locke's ideas about consent of the governed.
So you've got this boiling resentment fueled by Enlightenment ideas, and then Paine comes in and turns up the heat even more. And finally, boom, the Declaration of Independence in 1776.
Right. The Declaration, it wasn't just about saying we're independent. It was a powerful statement of those Enlightenment principles.
Wow.
Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, straight from Locke. It was a clear break from the old world.
And the colonists, they weren't just all talk. They were ready to fight for that independence.
Absolutely. The American Revolution was putting those Enlightenment ideals to the test, fighting a massive empire for their freedom. And figures like George Washington emerged. Skilled general, symbol of American resilience. He led the charge.
And against all odds, they won.
They did. But even though they won, the revolution's legacy, it's complex.
How so?
Well, the revolution declared that all men are created equal, right? But it didn't deal with the huge problem of slavery. That contradiction would hang over the nation for a long time.
Very true. A step forward, but definitely not perfect.
No revolution ever is. But the American Revolution showed that those Enlightenment ideas could inspire real action, real political change. And its impact, it went way beyond America.
Because over in France, another revolution was brewing. And that one, it seems even more intense, more explosive. ready to dive into the French Revolution.
Absolutely. Similar ideas at play, but the French Revolution took a very different, a much more turbulent path.
Okay, French Revolution time. If the American Revolution was like, controlled burn, the French one was an inferno.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Both had those Enlightenment ideals at their core, but the French Revolution, it was driven by this deep, deep inequality, social and economic, that had been simmering for ages. Remember those lecture notes on the three estates?
Oh yeah, the clergy, the nobility, and then everyone else crammed into that third estate. Talk about an unfair system, right?
Exactly. The first and second estate, they had all these privileges, while the third estate, well, they paid most of the taxes and had basically no say in how things were run. It was like a ticking time bomb.
Well, what set it off?
France was in a financial mess, partly because the monarchy was spending like crazy and they had all these costly wars. Louis VI, the king, he was desperate for cash, so he decided to call a meeting of the Estates General. That's a representative body, hadn't met in over 150 years.
He asked the people to help him with his money problems. Sounds a little risky, to say the least.
It was a huge gamble, and let's just say it didn't pay off. The Third Estate, they were inspired by those Enlightenment ideas, emboldened by what happened in America. They wanted real change. More representation, a fair tax system, an end to all those aristocratic privileges.
I bet that didn't go over well with the king. Did he give in to their demands?
Nope, not a chance. The first and second estates, they wanted to hold on to their power. They blocked every attempt at reform. And the third estate, they were fed up. So they did something bold. They declared themselves the National Assembly and said they were going to create a new constitution for France.
Whoa, things escalated quickly. That's a serious power move.
It was a defining moment. Direct challenge to the king, saying that the power belongs to the people.
And this is where the Bastille gets stormed, right? That's like the iconic image of the French Revolution.
Well, you got it. July 14th, 1789, a Parisian mob stormed the Bastille, which was a royal fortress. It had become the symbol of oppression. It wasn't just about breaking out prisoners. It was a powerful message, against the monarchy. The old order was crumbling.
Okay, so the Bastille falls. The king's power is weakened. The National Assembly's in charge. Did France just become a democracy overnight? Well, not exactly. The French Revolution, it was a long, messy process with a lot of ups and downs. The National Assembly, they were inspired by the American Declaration of Independence, so they drafted their own version, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen.
So they were setting the foundation for a new, more just society.
That was the goal. The Declaration, it stated these fundamental rights for everyone: liberty, equality, fraternity. Those became the core values of the revolution. But actually putting those ideals into practice, well, that turned out to be incredibly difficult.
How so?
The revolution, it unleashed these powerful forces that were hard to control. France was deeply divided. Some people embraced the revolution. Others wanted the old ways back. You had moderates who wanted gradual change, and then the radicals who wanted to tear everything down and start over.
So there was fighting even within the revolution itself.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that struggle for power, it shaped the course of the revolution, led to periods of intense violence and instability.
This is where the Reign of Terror comes in, right?
Yep, that's right. France was facing threats, both from within and outside. And this group, the Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, they came to power. They believed that extreme measures were necessary to protect the revolution. They weren't messing around.
And that's when the guillotine became this, terrifying symbol of the revolution.
Sadly, yes. The Reign of Terror, it's a dark period, a time of fear and paranoia. Thousands were executed, just suspected of being against the revolution. Even people who had been revolutionaries themselves became victims.
It really shows that even revolutions fought for good reasons can turn into something really awful.
It's a cautionary tale, for sure. But even during those dark times, the French Revolution, it was still spreading those ideas of liberty, equality, and the power of the people. Its impact was felt way beyond France, inspiring other revolutions, shaping European history.
And speaking of shaping history, wasn't there this military leader who emerged from all that chaos?
Napoleon, right?
Yes, Napoleon. He enters the scene in this final act of the French Revolution, a twist no one saw coming. This just gets more and more interesting.
Get ready, because Napoleon's story is a wild one. His rise to power reshaped France and the world.
All right, we're back, and I gotta say, that French Revolution was a whirlwind. Now we're talking about Napoleon. From all that chaos to becoming an emperor, talk about a crazy turn of events.
It really is a fascinating twist. See, the French Revolution, even with all the violence and instability, it left this, like, power vacuum. And that's where Napoleon Bonaparte comes in, this brilliant, ambitious young general ready to seize the opportunity.
So he basically used that instability to his advantage.
Exactly. Napoleon, he was incredibly skilled, both as a military leader and a politician. He climbed the ranks of the army during the revolution, proving himself in battle after battle. In France, they were craving stability, strong leadership, someone to take charge. Napoleon fit the bill perfectly.
And he definitely took charge. But how did he go from general to emperor? I mean, didn't France just get rid of a king? They wouldn't want another monarch, right?
That's a good point. You'd think they'd be done with kings. But the French Revolution, it wasn't just about getting rid of a king, right? It was about creating a whole new kind of government, one that was based on those ideals of liberty, equality, and the power of the people. And a lot of people saw Napoleon as the guy who could bring order to the chaos, who could protect the changes the revolution brought, while also providing that stability and leadership they were longing for.
So they were willing to, like, sacrifice some of that freedom they fought so hard for in exchange for security and a sense of order.
Yeah, in a way. And Napoleon, he knew how to play to those desires. He presented himself as the true successor of the revolution, the protector of its legacy, even as he was consolidating his own power. And then, in 1804, he crowns himself emperor.
Wow. Talk about bold. So what happened to all those revolutionary ideals, the liberty and equality under Napoleon? Did he just throw them out the window?
It's complicated. Napoleon, he's a really complex figure, a man of contradictions. On one hand, he was definitely an authoritarian ruler. He centralized power, shut down any opposition, and launched all these military campaigns across Europe, basically dragging the continent into war.
Doesn't sound too great for liberty and equality.
No, it wasn't. But at the same time, Napoleon, he also put some important reforms in place that actually reflected those revolutionary ideals. For example, he introduced the Napoleonic Code, which was a legal system that promoted equality before the law. It got rid of those old feudal privileges. That was a direct result of the revolution's attack on the old system.
So he was both a product of the revolution and someone who shaped its legacy in ways no one could have predicted.
Exactly. And Napoleon's impact, it went way beyond the borders of France. His conquests, they spread the ideas of the revolution all over Europe, even though they also triggered resistance and fueled nationalist movements.
So the French Revolution and Napoleon's role in it, they had these ripple effects across the whole continent.
Oh, absolutely. You can't understand modern European history without understanding the French Revolution and Napoleon's place in it. And that legacy, well, it's still shaping the world we live in today, both the good and the bad.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. Enlightenment, American Revolution, French Revolution, Napoleon's rise to power. It's fascinating to see how all these events are connected, even though they happen in different places and at different times.
They really are intertwined, and it's interesting to think about how they still influence our understanding of democracy and human rights today.
So if you had to sum it all up, what are the key takeaways? What can we learn from these revolutions as we try to make sense of our own complicated world?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that the fight for liberty and equality, it's never really over. It's not like you reach a point and then you're done. It's a constant struggle. It requires us to be vigilant, to be engaged, and to challenge the way things are, always pushing for something better.
It's like democracy is always a work in progress, something we have to actively defend and fight for.
Exactly. Another thing to remember is that revolutions, even when they're fought for the right reasons, they can have consequences that no one intended. They can set loose forces that are impossible to control. They can lead to violence, instability, even tyranny. It shows that change, even positive change, can be messy, unpredictable.
It makes you think we need to be careful what we wish for, because revolutions can have outcomes that we never expected.
That's a good point. And finally, I think it's crucial to remember that the revolutions we've been discussing, at their heart, they were about changing the relationship between the people and the government. They challenged the idea that power should belong to just a small group, and they asserted those fundamental rights of individuals, the idea that power ultimately comes from the people.
So they were all about shifting that balance of power, giving more power to the people.
Precisely. And that's a legacy that continues to inspire and shape democratic movements all around the world, even today.
Wow, that's a lot to absorb. This deep dive has given you so much to think about.
Me too. And I hope our listeners feel the same way. It's been a really fascinating journey through a period of history that was absolutely crucial, and it still resonates with us today.
I couldn't agree more. And to all of you listening, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive as much as we did. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you want to share your thoughts or if you have ideas for future episodes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.